We're going to verify any tax holiday. And then we're going to, of course, send correct sales tax back to your checkout or your ERP invoice in real time, so sub-second. And then we're going to store the data, the transactional data, for future remittance with the states. So Avalara was founded in 2004 with, again, with the idea of getting sales tax software off-premise into the cloud. Currently today we have over 22,000 active customers, and it's really from small office, home office, all the way to the enterprise. We have a multi-tenant cloud solution, which basically means you can actually have not only more than one company, but ultimately it's an omni-source, so we can run various systems for one business as well. Currently today we employ over 1,200 employees in 7 countries. As I mentioned, we have over 550 pre-built integrations to, let's say, Sage, Microsoft, Magento, BigCommerce, so whether it be ERP or ecommerce, also Salesforce if you're looking for CRM. We calculated 10 billion calculations in 2016, and currently we file over 1 million sales tax returns annually and remit over $14 billion to the different taxing authorities. We're the only company that offers a guaranteed accurate rate, so it'll give you a level of confidence that Avalara is the right choice here. As I mentioned, we are more geared towards the mid-sized market, but just see a handful of customers that Avalara currently has as a customer base. So it just gives you kind of a level of different industries that we can support. So we can support manufacturing, wholesale, and then of course retail, e-com. So basically that is Avalara and what we can support today. So I would love to just kind of jump into the Sage demonstration. If Mark, you're ready, I can have them pass you over the controls.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to do it. So as I'm getting the controls, I'll just take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Mark Giddens. I run our sales engineering team at Avalara, and I've been with the company for 12 years since we started it. Prior to working with Avalara, I actually worked for Sage Software at the time we called it the Mass 90 Software Group. Of course, I'm dating myself by saying that. But I have quite a lot of experience with partners like ISM in supporting Sage customers in automating their taxes and things like that. So I'm hoping my perspective will be helpful as you kind of see what our software can do. As I get started, I think everybody can see my screen now. There's a connector that we've built for the Sage platform, and what that connector is basically integration software. The purpose of the integration software is to make it so Sage 100 can talk to our cloud service. And in other words, as Jeff had said, instead of you having to research tax rates and build tax tables or be experts around taxation, you can leverage this tool to do it, similar like you would leverage a credit card API or some type of web service to do your credit card processing. So once that connector's been installed, and by the way, it only takes a couple of hours, maybe a half a day, ISM and so basically, once that software is installed, then you're communicating to our web service. So I'll show you the setup here. If I go into the AvaTax configuration folder, what you'll see is that by company code for your database, you can enable our service. So when you sign up with Avalara, you're given an account value and a license key, and then of course a web URL to point the service to. I'm just going to go ahead and click this button, and what you'll see is that I should have an active connection to the Avalara tax service. So I'll just give the system a moment to validate that. And there's some configuration choices that you can use to set this up so that we can customize the experience for you without having to do custom programming. For example, Jeff mentioned address verification and how that might be valuable to you. And you know, one option here, for example, is that if you prefer to see addresses returned in uppercase, you can click that box and see that as well. But once this software connector's been installed, and there's a little bit of work that we'll get into later as far as how you configure your company tax profile in the AvaTax system. But once that's set up, we're going to simplify the process for doing taxes within Sage. And that becomes really clear as we go into the customer maintenance module. And I'm going to pull up my customer Adams and Hanks here. And what I want to do is I want to look at the ship to address, because typically, as I've worked with Sage customers over the years, if you're not using something like Avalara, you're required to research tax rates at government websites. And then Sage has a structure. You're probably familiar with tax schedules and tax codes where you can set up your jurisdictions, you can set up your rates in the system, you can group them together, and basically there's a trigger called a tax schedule that you can assign to your customer. Working with customers over the years, you'll see companies have hundreds, thousands of these tables that they're trying to manage, and they're relying on their order entry folks to make the right decision, and we're not relying on internal resources to keep this information current as tax rates change and things like that. With Avalara, all that work goes away. You don't ever have to look up the tax rate again. And so, in other words, the setting up this tax schedule is basically the trigger that tells Sage to talk to our web service for the calculation. So you might be wondering, asking yourself, well, how does Avalara know the tax rate if I'm not choosing it in the system, setting it up and managing it? And the reason is because we're an app-based system. So one of the things that you'll see that Avalara adds, part of this experience, is this little orange button. And you'll see that throughout the system in places where addresses are managed. The purpose of that little A, it's a button for you to push to validate an address. So if you were entering a new address, as often happens in a business, or you're setting up a new customer and you're entering an address, maybe you have the street address and a zip code, but you don't know the zip plus 4, or maybe they give you a bad address. What our system is able to do is validate addresses as you enter them against the U.S. Postal Service CAS certified database. This means it's really accurate because it's certified by the post office, the U.S. Service. But here's an example. I typed in 67 Orchard in Irvine, California. When I click on that A, what you'll see is the system's communicating with Avalara. And typically, it may be I'm doing this GoToMeeting, which is taking up some of my bandwidth on my internet, my machine here. Things tend to go slow when I'm doing a GoToMeeting. But what you can see is the system returns a validated address, and if I click on OK, it's updated that address with the 9-digit zip code. I can show you a better example of this, I think, by typing in 1555 Mesa Verde, and maybe I don't know if it's street, lane, road, anything like that. Maybe I only know the zip code there, Costa Mesa. When I click on the orange A there, what you'll see is our system's going to go ahead and validate that address, and it identified this should be 15 Mesa Verde Drive East. It added the directionals, the 9-digit zip code. Going back to Jeff's point earlier, zip codes are really designed for delivering mail. They're not a very accurate method for assigning tax rates. What Avalara is doing in a tax calculation process is we're taking that validated address, we're correcting it, standardizing it to U.S. Postal Service standard, but then we're also identifying the latitude and longitude coordinates. And we've come to market. We were the first to do this with a system that basically identifies jurisdictions based on the latitude and longitude coordinates. So we know all the coordinates of where tax boundaries intersect and things like that, which means it's a very highly accurate way to do taxes. Challenges you can run into if you're using the wrong tax rate, you end up overcharging your customer. That can make them upset, create a customer service issue, things like that. Certainly everybody knows, I think, that if you're undercharging taxes, the government tends to frown upon that. So this is just ensuring that to a level of street level accuracy, or we call it sometimes rooftop accuracy, you're getting the right tax rate for your customer each and every time. And A couple of tools that we enable in those AvaTax folders as you get started with the configuration. One of them you can see here is a batch address validation. This is a bulk process for you to take all the addresses maybe that you've accumulated with Sage over the years, and you can run a report to see which of your bill to, ship to, vendor or vendor purchase addresses conflicts with the U.S. Postal Service database. You can update those in bulk as you go through that process. The other question that frequently comes up is when I go to use Avalara, I've been doing my own tax schedules for all these years. Maybe I've been using Sage for a long time. I don't want to have to go in and update switch everything from a table to that exists to AvaTax one by one. It'll take me the rest of my life. There's a tool, a tax schedule update utility that you can see here that allows you to update those in bulk as well. I should mention that we have similar capabilities across all of our Sage products that we integrate to, whether that's Sage 100, 300, 500, or X3 as well as Sage 50 we do also. So there's a byproduct benefit potentially for your business here. I mean, obviously the reason that I mentioned addresses are so important to us is one of the easiest ways to get tax wrong is to source the tax to the wrong address or the wrong zip code or make a mistake in that manner. But a lot of times we hear feedback from companies that are using us that say, you know what, this actually helps my business secondarily in terms of shipping efficiencies, because before we even get a customer address into the system, we're able to validate if it's correct or not, which means we don't send invoices to the wrong place, we don't ship packages to the wrong place, we don't get fines or fees from FedEx or UPS or things like that. So it might be beneficial even outside of tax for you as well. But I'm going to go ahead and I am going to accept the changes that I made. And then downstream, this simplifies the process even further for me as a user. When I go into sales order entry, now I no longer have to think about tax at all. I can make a new sales order here, select my customer, Adams and Hanks. I'm going to ultimately have to make a decision as far as, where am I shipping to them? I know a lot of Sage customers set up their ship to addresses and store them in the database, by establishing them as a ship to location. You can change the ship to location through the process. And one of the cool things I'll show you here is we can validate addresses on the fly right within this document. Or sometimes I've worked with customers that are using Sage that say, we want to enter a new address on the fly. So we don't want to save anything back to their customer record, but I want to type over this and put in a new address. And you can actually validate the addresses in that process too. But once you've decided where you're shipping to, this is stuff that you got to do anyways, right? I'm just going to choose the item or items that I'm going to sell, and I'm going to sell a gauge here of indoor wire. Maybe I'll sell 10 of them. And basically, when I go to the totals tab, this is another point where Sage 100 is talking to Avalara over the internet. So it's sending a little encrypted XML file, and it's sending those data points that Jeff mentioned earlier, that, where you're shipping from, where you're shipping to, the items that you're selling, the quantities, the amounts, any discounts that are applied, et cetera, and so forth. And then near instantaneously, we're calculating the tax. So you can see the tax has already been updated here, and the tax is $11.08. And what you can see if I click on this tax detail button, that instead of having tax codes specific to jurisdiction, there's basically 5 buckets that the taxes will feed back into. Here on this transaction, we had California state tax for $9.17. We had Orange County tax for 38 cents. So it's going to break it out in those various categories within Sage if you want additional details. But the fantastic news for you as a user, your people as users, is you no longer have to do this tax research, set up these tables in the form of tax jurisdictions and codes, and establish the rates and keep those up to date as rates change, and then group them together in tax schedules and rely on salespeople or order people or clerks to make those decisions. The system's actually carrying this out automatically. So again, this should save people time, so they can focus on other more important processes or things that they're working on in the finance department, rather than tax, which ultimately is a pass-through to the business. So this is the integration with Sage. Again, we install this connector, and really what it does is just eliminate the need for manual work to maintain a tax process and apply tax content. I want to spend a little bit of time here kind of walking through what we call the AvaTax admin portal, or you'll hear it called the admin dashboard. This is where companies do a couple of things primarily. They're required to, the first time you come in here, there'll be a process where you set up your company and define what we call your tax strategy or your tax policy. That occurs in the organization tab. And this looks way confusing because I have a whole bunch of demo instances set up and linked here. But as many accounting entities as you have, you'll have company databases in Sage, and you'll have those set up in the system. And we can handle that where we would apply we can apply the same tax code to, the same tax rules to a parent-child company where maybe the subsidiary inherits the same tax strategy as the parent, or if you have different entities or sub-entities that are treated differently, maybe have their own tax IDs, those can be separate. But I wanted to show you as an example, I'll just go into one of my demo accounts, Ian's demo company. And the setup process, in terms of setting up your company name, address, and we don't have to go through that. I think that's fairly intuitive. But I want to walk you through some of these setup processes so you understand how easy it is to get started with the software. If I go into Nexus jurisdictions, I click on this J. What I'm going to be looking at is a list of all the countries where potentially I could be collecting taxes. I should take this moment to mention that Avalara supports over 200 countries in terms of providing VAT logic and rates to do international taxes. So we help customers not just in the U.S. and in North America with Canada, but all over the globe. But the other thing I wanted to point out is, most of these countries outside of the U.S. are administered, the taxes are administered at a federal level. The U.S. and Canada with its provinces are a little bit different. There's some additional setup involved in the United States by saying, geez, where do I have Nexus, or where am I registered to collect tax? And if anybody on the phone is not familiar with the concept of Nexus, we could have a really long conversation about what Nexus is, because as Jeff pointed out, not only is Nexus confusing state to state, but it's changing at a really rapid pace. The most recent occurrence is states passing economic nexus laws where they say, hey, not only is it a factor of whether you have a physical presence, like you have people or payroll or property or locations, now we're going way beyond that, and we're saying, like South Dakota said, I think they said if you make more than $200,000 in sales or have more than 250 sales instances of sales that you make in our state, well, now you've created economic nexus and you need to register and collect taxes. Sometimes we do these types of seminars and people are confused. Geez, I don't even know if I know what's going on with Nexus, or we haven't looked at this in a long time, or maybe I'm just confused. Avalara does offer some tax consulting services that can help you to figure out what the right strategy is for your business, so you don't leave yourself in a position where you're creating risk or exposing yourself to future audits and fines and penalties and that kind of thing. But once you've determined what your tax policy is, it's really easy to set it up in the admin portal. I just go in and I say, these are the states that I'm registered, and I set them up in the system. And there's a process by which you're going to enter a filing calendar, which means for each of these states where I'm saying I have Nexus, what forms am I required to file? How frequently do I file those forms? Like in California, I work with a lot of customers that deal with the California BOE 401A2 form. That's typically a quarterly form that someone would need to file, so that would be set up in our system. But once you've made those selections as far as where you're registered, what forms you're filing, when those filings are due, you've completed the jurisdictional aspect of the setup. There's a second process that you'd go through where you would want to align your products and services, the things that you sell, to Avalara codes. And I'm just going to pull up a neat tool, and I use this example sometimes. as far as how these codes work. These are goods and service codes, or system tax codes we call them. And the idea is we have thousands of codes that represent different products and services that you might be selling. So let's say your company is a seller of apparel. Maybe you sell clothing. Maybe one of the articles of clothing that you sell is a belt. Well, we have to provide you with granular codes, because if I were to ask you, is a belt taxable, first you'd have to say what state, because that can vary quite a bit. Some states tax things that other states don't, and vice versa. But I also have to ask you, what type of belt are we talking about? So if I type in belt here, you can see, and the reason there's different codes for these different types of belts is there's different tax implications in some of the different states across the country. So it really does matter if I'm selling a belt like I'd buy at a department store versus a safety belt or a tool belt, or if I'm buying just a buckle, or it's a medical belt, it's an abdominal belt, or maybe we're selling a garter belt or something like that. It really depends state to state. And so the process of setting up AvaTax is to define what products and services are you selling and identify the appropriate codes that represent those in our system, because behind each one of these thousands of codes that we have are even more thousands of rules that we manage, so our system knows exactly what states a tool belt is taxable and where it's not when you sell it. And so there's a process here where typically what companies do to make it easier is they'll import their items into our admin console. You can do that with an Excel file, and you can index those items from Sage to what's called a system tax code. So if you look at this children's clothing code that's applied to this item 008, when you sell item 008 in Sage, we know exactly what it is because of this code, and then we apply the taxation automatically real time as a part of that calculation. Those are probably the two most significant processes in terms of preparing to use the software, other than installing the connector, the integration software in Sage. We want to make sure that this console mirrors your company's tax policy, so that you don't have to do research, go out, research statutes or laws about different products and services that you're selling and try and set those up in Sage. You don't have to write for letter rulings necessarily to get a special opinion on something that's already been legislated on that you're selling. The system's going to carry out that tax logic. As you process transactions in Sage, we're going to maintain a record of them in the admin console. And I'm going to pull up a transaction or two to look at. And these are the invoices that you're processing in Sage. They look a little bit different. And the reason they look a little bit different is because they actually have more information that's relevant to tax. So I'm just looking at some recent invoices here that we did. And one of our other engineers, John, I can see is doing a demo. He uses Johnny Tax as his customer. But we'll see if there's something interesting here. I can go into one of these invoices, and in addition to all the sales details as far as where we're shipping to and what we're selling and the amounts and the tax, we also capture where are we shipping from and where are we shipping to. So we're shipping, in this case, from Bainbridge Island to Largo, Florida. And the system knows automatically that this is an interstate transaction, so it's actually considered a seller's use tax, or you might hear that referred to as a vendor use tax. We're applying the use tax rate. Some states have different sales tax rates than use tax rates. And we're also applying the determination based on the impact of this type of item and how Florida taxes it. So item GC1060 has been coded to a general category called tangible personal property. So this is kind of non-specific tangible goods for things like clothing, or if you're selling food, or you're selling software products. There could be some more specific categories that you'd want to look at, but every state basically has a sales tax taxes tangible personal property. You can see that the tax here is $6,050. And the level of detail that we present to you shows exactly what jurisdictions, the rates, the taxable amounts, and what you can see here is that this transaction, because of the size of the sale, was not taxed, was taxed at the state level, so there's $6,000 in tax, but Florida has a single article tax And because this is a huge sale for us, I guess, you can see that the amount here, only $5,000 of it is capped and taxed at the county rate. So the system is very smart in terms of applying tax logic that you or I could probably never remember or keep track of ourselves, because there's the strength of hundreds of tax researchers behind this that are building out and applying that content in our system. Hey, here's the really good news. If a customer calls you up, which is apt to happen when I talk to people that interface with customers, they may call you up and they're not familiar with Florida. Hey, Mark, why are you charging me $6,050? You made a sale to me of, what is that, $1 million, $100,000? You can print this out to a PDF. You can email it right to your customer. Or even more substantial, I think, is if a company is going through a sales tax audit, and in those audits, there's a burden of proof on you to present documents to show that you have a documented, repeatable process and that you're doing tax accurately. The way companies do tax and manage tax, most of the time when they're going through an audit, what they're able to demonstrate is that they try real hard to do tax right, but they're not able to show accuracy. And what this system shows is a documented, repeatable process that ensures accuracy, which means it should simplify the audit process in terms of capturing that information and interfacing with the auditor. Reminds me of one of my favorite stories. There's a company of Acumatica Software, and they're down in the southeast, and they used to get audited. They were on Mississippi's audit radar. They had an audit in the past, and it was often likely to happen once you're audited once. Whatever that state's audit cycle is, the look-back period, you're typically audited again. So every 3 years, Mississippi would come in and audit Acumatica Software. And what Mary was telling us was that it was a month-long process prior to using Avalara. She said the last time that she went through an audit with the state of Mississippi, she ran a report from our system of the transactions. She dumped it into an Excel file. She said her audit was concluded with no mistakes, fines, penalties, interest in 20 minutes. So it can be really powerful stuff. The other significant advantage that I want to kind of focus on as kind of a final piece to this is simplifying the process of filing returns. So much work goes into running reports. If you're a person that does the taxes, running reports and filling out forms and cutting checks and paying all these states on their different schedules and timetables. And some states want you to do it electronically. Some states want you to do it on paper. That can be a real nightmare. Not to mention, if you file late, there's interest and penalties that can be assessed on real tax dollars, which makes it really dangerous if you don't have a process to manage this. So based on that filing calendar, the process is someone in the organization comes through and they do a reconciliation. And you can see here by jurisdiction, you've got the numbers broken out by sales, exempt sales, taxable sales, the period liability, how much you owe, and the filing status of the return. Well, this makes it easy for companies to run a sales report in Sage 100 and identify that they're in balance with their sales. Also, they can create a liability report to balance against their sales liability account in a GL. And you can look at this certainly at a more granular level. Maybe you like to look at the details, and so beyond the state, I'm curious, in California, where did all our tax money go to? Well, certainly here you can see we collected or invoiced for $6,600, $66.0838 for California, but we also had Sacramento tax for $9.11 and 50 cents, and then some additional Sacramento Transportation Authority taxes. If anybody on the phone is familiar, I use this example because the A2 form, the BOE 401 A2 form in California is a fun summer project. No, I kid. It's a terrible form to fill out because there's 5.5 pages of jurisdictions where you need to list out exactly what you sold in each jurisdiction. Our system automates that because once you've done the reconciliation, you don't need to file a form. You simply approve the worksheets, and then we set up an ACH payment from your, a business checking account or account that you want to deposit into, and then, you have till the 10th of the month to do your reconciliation. Then you're paying us the full amount of the tax due, and then you're done. Avalara interfaces with the state and local governments. We file and pay your taxes, and we really eliminate the burdensome work the administrivia, I hear it called, in terms of maintaining compliance and making sure you file your taxes on time. You know, what I presented here today, the intention is to show you how the Sage sales tax solution can really save you time and effort, you know, refocus your finance team or the part of someone's time that's spent managing taxes on other things that are more valuable for your business. I talk to a lot of business owners and leaders that say, you know, it'd be really great if I could take my people off of tax and put them on making collections calls to bring money in the door that customers owe us and shorten our you know, our AR lag and things like that. And you absolutely can do that because this is really eliminating time involved in managing tax. You know, it also ensures accuracy, which dramatically reduces your risk, lowers the likelihood in the event of an audit that you would lose money, and it just helps you achieve compliance. I mean, so many companies that we're talking to today, honestly, they tell us all the time, I'm not really worried about compliance, but what they are interested in is in growth, and they want to make sure that compliance doesn't impact their ability to grow. And this is the type of solution that you can bolt on to Sage, very easy to deploy, which makes it so you can be compliant, you can grow your business, but you don't have to add heads or teach people about tax. You can really focus on what matters to you. So with that, Jeff, I'd like to turn it back to you. And I don't know if we have any questions that have come in. I've not been paying attention to the question window, or if we can open it up to questions from the audience. Certainly be happy to field any of those if people are curious.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Do you have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? Do you have any questions, Jason?
Here's what I would offer. You know, maybe this presentation has got you thinking a little bit, or maybe you're curious to learn more. Jeff or I certainly would be willing to meet with you and do a demo for your company. So if there's others in your organization that you think might want to take a look at this, but you'd like to involve in some discussion or evaluation around it, we'd be happy to assist. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Sage companies that use our software. It's one of our most popular integrations. We've done a lot of work over the years with ISM since we started the business, and have a great track record of success in terms of providing a solution. One of the things that I know Jeff shared a lot of statistics about our company, more so just from the perspective of getting you comfortable with who we are and how we can help. But the one statistic that I really enjoy is that our churn, we have a single-digit churn. It's very low. Less than 5% of our customers cancel every year. And as you know, when we're providing a subscription service, that really matters. To us, we don't make money if we lose customers, right? But it says that to me that customers buy this software, you know, they may have been doing taxes themselves. They don't later decide, you know what, I wish I could go back to the old way of doing it myself. And I think it speaks to the experience that we can provide them and helping them to, you know, tackle this business challenge, but not create more problems for them in the process. So.
Okay. Well, I will certainly reach out to Jason and remind him of that offer and see if we can't get something scheduled if that's something they are interested in. I want to thank you and Mark for your time. I appreciate it. And if there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and end this webinar.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.